The tower is down. You probably will have suspected that already if you listen to the tower broadcast. The tower's down. Some things have to be reset. Hopefully, that'll be taken care of later today. In the meantime, I am on the stream and I am on the internet at K Talk. If you listen by radio, which of course those listening by radio can't hear me say this. I think they know to switch over. I think they know to switch over to the computer or to their iPhones or their smartphones that carry the apps that carry the radio show. But it's Wednesday, and there are plenty of things to talk about here on the 11th day of March. And I am I'm I'm fighting. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold that's hit me. I am just I am just working entirely too much, and I need to slow down. I'm in the clinic almost 5.5 days a week now, and I have just got to slow down. There's been so much demand for this half off special that and I don't want to turn anybody down. I just keep plugging away, but it's taken its toll. Now I know I'm only 75. I don't want to sound like a big baby, but this morning I'm just, fighting, and I think I'm winning. I have a protocol that I follow anytime I start to feel a cold come on, which is not very often. But I'm drinking my echinacea tea right now, and when I feel the slightest little bit of scratchiness or something starting to develop in my throat, I will take 6 cal ammo immediately, calcium ammonium chloride. It acidifies the system, which is why a lot of people will take a big blast of ascorbic acid, synthetic vitamin C, whenever they start to feel something coming over them because it acidifies the system. And if it's being caused by a bacteria, bacteria, of course, cannot thrive in an acidic environment. It can only thrive in an alkaline environment. Anybody who's had microbiology 101 understands that. Bacteria only grow in an alkaline condition. And when you acidify the system, it helps to clean out that bacteria pretty quick. So I take about 6 cal ammo right away, and I'll take about 2 to 3 of them every 4 or 5 hours. Very inexpensive. Cal ammo, CALAMO, at forbiddendoctor.com. Very, very cheap material, cost-wise. And then I take Conjuplex, and I'll take 6 of those right off the bat. And I'll take about 2 of those sometimes every hour. They're just little capsules. Take about 2 of them every hour. They're loaded with calcium and a thymus stimulator, which is where your white blood cells come from, and a few other things to perk up the immune response. And I can usually throw it in 24 hours and then not end up with a cold at all. But during the show, I might sneeze a few times or whatever else, but I feel a lot better than I might sound. And I'm doing everything to keep this out of my throat. All right, what do I want to talk about today? I want to talk about some interesting polling that shows that big pharma discovered something a long time ago regarding vaccines, and they're trying to cover it up. So I want to talk about that, and then also I want to talk about the CIA. You would think that would be resolved or should better be discussed on a Monday or Tuesday show. But there is a hidden document that was declassified, that was printed 60 years ago about a potential cure for cancer. And the CIA covered it up. So I want to talk about that as well. I just heard this morning that a dear friend of mine is suffering from brain tumors. And I wasn't expecting this. They're not a patient, but they're still a good friend, and any of their suffering impacts all of us. All right, so let me get going here by and then after I talk about those two things, I want to talk about the health of your children's gut because while we're in the midst of cold and flu season, then we'll be coming out of it in another month or so. There are a lot of children that are not patients of our clinic. They're not related to anybody in our clinic. I've just heard them from other people talk about how these kids are immediately put on antibiotics. The slightest indication of some kind of an infectious process that's going on, which may not be an infectious process at all, like what I'm feeling right now. I think my sinuses are just trying to cleanse themselves of all this crap that I've been breathing for the last several months, which is one of the places that the spring cold comes from. There's nothing more than your body trying to clean out the sinuses that have accumulated this gooket that's in the air in Utah in the wintertime. Well, a lot of times that's all there's going on with a child. And even though they might have a slight fever, and usually when you see a child with a fever, it's because the immune system has been activated. And if the fever doesn't get over 103, you don't worry about it. Just leave them alone and keep them comfortable, give them plenty of fluids. Don't feed them much because they won't be hungry. If they're not hungry, don't feed them. And let their bodies clean themselves out, then everything's going to be just fine. Well, these poor children that are put on antibiotics, it's messing up their gut, even before they hit puberty. And the gut is so vital to their health, and I'll get into that during the second hour. During the first hour, and another thing, we are just a few, I think less than 10 away from 900 subscribers on the YouTube channel. And if you are listening over the internet or you're listening through the stream, if you could be so kind as to go to youtube.com/breaking health barriers. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. That'll take us over 900. And then my goal for the rest of this year is to hit 1,000. And even though there are a lot of people out there on the internet and podcasting that have tens of thousands, I just haven't been provocative enough to stimulate that. But we're slowly growing week by week. Excuse me. So let me get into what I've got lined up here that I hope you'll find interesting. The story at a glance here, the one from this polling and this vaccine thing, due to widespread media and scientific censorship. And if you think there's censorship going on about the war right now, there's censorship almost anywhere you turn if it gets in the way of the flow of money. And due to the censorship and the accurate information which challenges the pharmaceutical interests, it's very difficult to obtain that information. And polling offers a unique means to try to bypass this kind of a blockade. So extensive polling shows that anywhere from 9 to 34% of COVID vaccine recipients develop side effects from the vaccine. 7 to 13% develop serious side effects. 7.5 to 22% know somebody with a severe vaccine injury. And 24 to 28% know someone who they believe died from the vaccine. And 46 to 55% believe the COVID vaccines have killed a significant number of people. And these results are obviously profound and likely account for this unprecedented loss of trust in doctors and hospitals since COVID came out. Now, I wasn't polled in this, but I have a poll of my own with my patients, and it is surprising how many of them who at one time would give considerable consideration to what their family practice doctor had to say to them about whatever current complaint they had, with reasonable trust and hopefulness of its outcome. as to how many of them now don't even want to go there. And if they need an antibiotic or something, they just want to run into an Instacare, get the prescription, and get out. And I asked him, where's this coming from? Where's this change of attitude coming from? And it's the COVID stuff. People are waking up to the fact that they've had the wool pulled over their eyes. So these results are profound, as I said, probably account for the lack, this unprecedented trust of doctors in hospitals, because those who were polled, who were asked before COVID began, on up to 100%, how much did you trust what medicine had to tell you about your symptomatic picture? And how do you feel about it now? And it dropped from 71% to 40%, which is mirrored by a significant loss of trust in the pharmaceutical industry as well. And I've got patients who've told me they were given a prescription for whatever reason: blood problems, skin problems, heart problems, lung problems, gut problems, whatever. And they went ahead and they got the prescription, but they didn't take it. And I said, well, why did you get the prescription? And they have a pretty standard answer: I want the record to reflect that I purchased that stuff. But you're not taking it. No, I'm not going to take it. Why not? I want to pursue another course, one of a natural means, because I've used this stuff before and it makes me sick. So the significant loss of trust in the pharmaceutical industry, government health authorities, support for childhood vaccinations, which now almost half of the population polled in the United States has no trust left in vaccines. Now, MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, their policies and accomplishments, including those towards vaccines, are now some of the most popular issues with the electorate. But unfortunately, it's not being effectively promoted to the public due to constant ongoing media censorship. And so, to prepare for the midterms, the Trump administration has pivoted away from vaccines due to likely biased polling data that suggests that vaccines are a toxic issue that must be avoided to have a chance of winning the election. So you probably won't see much about vaccines in the midterm rhetoric. Now, I think this is a pivotal mistake, as the polls show immense support for Bobby Kennedy's actions on vaccines. And what do his actions break down to? Primarily, let's have some safety studies. Just show us these things are safe. And again, as I've said so many times, we just assume that because they are allowed to produce these chemicals, that everything is okay and that the government wouldn't let them put out something that wasn't good for us. But more people are waking up to the fact that of all the drugs out there in the marketplace, the drugs for your high blood pressure, the drugs for your low blood pressure, the drugs for your arrhythmias, the drugs for your consciousness, your brain, your cognizance, the drugs for your digestive system, for your elimination system, for your immune system, the drugs for your reproductive system. All of these things have serious side effects, and people are waking up to these things, and they're realizing that of all the drugs out there, they've gone through safety studies, except vaccines. Now, I've mentioned that to a few of my patients when this discussion came up. They have a hard time believing that. They say, oh, surely, Dr. Jack, come on. No, there's no safety studies. There are effectiveness studies in the sense that these toxic chemicals can produce an immune reaction and the creation of antibodies. That's true enough. There's studies to prove that. But there's no studies to show that over the long haul, these things are safe, not just effective, but safe to these little children's bodies, let alone an adult's body. So, because there is tremendous support for Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s actions in this regard, this mistake of dropping vaccines is a very similar thing to what happened in the 2020 election as the Trump administration struggled to address COVID. And you know what happened after that. So Joe Rogan recently had Bobby Kennedy Jr. on his show. And there Bobby Kennedy presented an excellent summary of the wide range of remarkable and previously impossible things that he and his team have been able to pull off after a year due to them having a president's complete support to challenge the vested interests that profit off of keeping us sick. And as such, for those of you who want to know what Maha is actually doing, I would recommend that you go to joerogan.com and look up his interview with Bobby Kennedy Jr. Unfortunately, this segment also confirms something I was quite worried about. That of RFK, someone I know who sincerely cares about vaccine safety, did not discuss vaccines with Rogan, even in numerous instances where it would have been the most expected subject to insert after related points were raised. Based on this, and many other shifts that I have recently noticed, I'm relatively certain the Trump administration received polling data that made them decide the vaccine subject needs to be avoided until the midterms, and that instead safer, S-A-F-E-R, safer topics with a more widespread appeal need to be focused on right now. Now, high-profile people with important subjects to discuss with Rogan never raise uncomfortable truths that could make an overall difference in public awareness during these shows, if you've seen any of his interviews. And Rogan has this innate ability to skip the heart of the matter in a non-suspicious, chatty way. Unconsciously or by design, who knows, but in any case, the masses in general are not very fond of the truth if it means coming to a painful realization. As I have always, I don't know where I got this, I read this somewhere, but it's become one of the pillars of my consciousness. And it goes like this: nothing is more difficult and painful to let go of something you have believed to be true most of your life. And when it comes down to areas of healthcare, I have patients who are very, very nice and very sweet and very kind to me, to my face, over the results that they get from our care. And by the same almost breath, they talk about how their spouse is not the least interested in what they're doing in our clinic and our completely medical and our drugs only. And I ask the same question of all of them. Do they see the improvement in your life? Do they see you're walking without a limp? Do they see that you're standing up straight? Do they see that you can go up and down stairs without that low back or hip pain anymore? Oh yeah, they're aware of that. Well, do they comment on it? No, they don't talk about it. And I always thought it was kind of interesting to be married to somebody like that. But that's the way it is, and I, a number of years ago, gave up the dream of saving everybody. And I just concentrate on those who want me to take care of them. And speaking of that, our half off special is still going. Half off of I saw 2 new people yesterday. Both of them one in their 60s, the other in their 70s. And they came in with the standard presentation that most people have: back pain, low back pain, leg pain, lack of energy, feeling like they're bending over like their parents did. And one of the most fun things for me is to see in their posture the immediate change after I work on them, where they stand up straight. And I say, "Do you feel taller?" And I say, "Yes, I feel taller." I say, "Well, you are. You're an inch to 2 inches taller than when you walked in here. You didn't grow, you just straightened up." I said, "Do your shoulders feel rounded?" "No, my shoulders feel back." I said, "Well, those muscles across your chest just relaxed." And it's like I say, at 75, I've got two younger brothers that were professionals that are retired, and I hear 2 or 3 times a day. If I see a couple of new patients, well, it wouldn't apply to them, but for follow-up patients, if I see, say 25, because I'm cutting back on the load, I just don't have the energy I had when I was 30. Um, out of 25, 30 patients, I'll hear 2 or 3 times a day, "What are we going to do if you retire? Who takes care of you, Dr. Jack?" And I'll tell them who takes care of me. And they say, and I said, "Why do you want to see them?" "Oh, no, no, we just want to know where we're going to go when you're not available anymore, because we would go to whoever takes care of you." And I thought, well, that makes sense. I didn't think of that. Now, back to what I'm trying to talk about here, about you're going to hear probably less and less about vaccines as we move towards the midterms. But there are safer political health topics within the integrative medicine field. And one of my long-standing frustrations with the discipline has been that most practitioners prefer the safe remedies, supplements and herbs. And that's half of my practice: supplements and herbs. And they're relatively unlikely to generate controversy. But avoiding the potent controversial therapies that get results but are, censored by big pharma was another matter. And I don't think you're going to hear too much of that for what is coming. Now, for decades, a fairly simple formula that has been used to control the population, and whether this is relative to controversial health subjects or political topics or financial, a very simple formula is being used to control you and to control me to the degree we allow the control to take place. And that is that enshrined chosen parties are considered as credible sources. The religion that you were raised with and are a part of, the neighborhood friends that you grew up with and regularly associate with, people in your workplace that have a certain authority that you consciously or subconsciously accept. Political parties, my party, right or wrong kind of thing. We look at these different things here as a credible source that we might turn to if we have a question, rather than our own research on the matter. Now, in order to maintain a certain level of self-imposed integrity on the choices that you make regarding any of these subjects, financial, political, economic, health, religion, whatever else, you want to check out the credibility of any of these sources, or a co-opted source, until you are totally satisfied that this source is providing you with accurate information. And to research that, you have to go in with the preconceived concept that not everything you're being told is correct, and that you have to accept the possibility that you have been deceived in certain areas, not necessarily willingly, but because your level of research acumen is not deep enough. What am I trying to say here? And I'm trying to not offend. But the system that wants you to continue to believe what any faction in the system is telling you is very vast and extremely interwoven. And the older I get, the more I realize that some of the constructs and the pillars upon which my life has been based in almost any area of cognizant thought needs to be researched. Now, I remember when I was on my LDS mission in Toronto, and not a few years previous to this, Hugh B. Brown was a counselor to David O. McKay. And David O. McKay was the president of the church when I went on my mission. And I was listening to a tape of a conference of missionaries that Elder Brown was speaking to just a year or two previous to my being there. And he said, every morning I review the constructs upon which my belief is based. And the first time I heard that, it just seemed like, well, yeah, sure, common sense. But then I got to thinking, this man is an apostle in the LDS Church and an immediate counselor to President McKay. And he says, I review the constructs upon which my beliefs are based every morning when I get up. Now, there have been a lot of mornings when I get up that I review the newspaper. And I don't get the newspaper anymore because everything's online. And so there's a lot of mornings when I am taking my supplements, drinking my herbal teas, in which I've got a cup of echinacea tea here right now for the way I feel. And I zip through various podcasts and news releases that are considered alternative. They're certainly not Western media. I don't watch Western media anymore, unless I want a good laugh. I'll watch the local news for the state of Utah and the surrounding Intermountain area when it comes to water and it comes to temperatures and forecasts and lifestyle, things like that. That's important to me because I'm a part of that. But for Western media, in the sense of Western culture and its place in the world, I don't listen to the Western media whatsoever because it's all a bunch of lies and crap anyway. Again, going back to the way this presentation started, to get you to believe a certain mindset, to keep you buying those drugs, to keep you buying those overly processed foods, to keep you asleep. And so when I got up this morning, and I get up a little earlier on Wednesday because I've got a 2-hour show, when I'm taking my supplements and drinking my tea, and I zip around to different podcasts on the internet, the ones that I like, the ones that I feel credible because I check out their sources. I also will ask myself when I think of it, why do I believe this? Why do I accept this as truth? Why have I accepted this long enough now that I haven't questioned this construct? Something about my religious faith, something about money, something about investments in land or precious metals or something about this current war with Iran and the war with Russia and all that, geopolitical things that are going on that can affect not just me, because I'm only going to be around about another 20 years, but I've got grandchildren who are still in grade school, and I'm concerned about them. And so I review these constructs to come up with something comfortable in my mind. But yes, I've researched this enough now that I feel pretty good about it until something comes along to change my mind. And there are those in the listening audience who have been listening since I first got on K Talk in 1995. And they're patients. And they're more than patients, they're dear friends. And I may see them once a year, once every couple of years, whenever their pain returns. And we talk about things in the past, things that kind of brought us together, things that are happening in their lives, and my themes and positions that I take on the radio show. And invariably, they point out, Jack, Dr. Jack, whatever, you've changed. And I said, you can see it? Is it obvious? Yeah, I've changed. You know, a lot, when it comes to social issues, I'm a little more liberal than I used to be. When it comes to economic issues, I'm more conservative than I used to be. But I look at the world differently now than I did, what, is it almost 30 years ago when I started this? Well, it is, because I am now in my 32nd year of radio broadcast. And back then, I was looking on how to save the world. And that was my flag that I flew under in my early days on K-Talk. Now, I'm not so worried about saving the world because the world will take care of itself. But it doesn't need me getting in the way of it. What the world needs from me now is for me to be some kind of a bulwark and a strength, primarily to the members of my family and those that trust me as their healthcare professional in the clinic setting. And I don't reach far beyond that anymore because, as I said, whatever's going to happen tomorrow is going to happen tomorrow. And all the worry and all the stress and the angst isn't going to change it. And so that stops me from the anxiety of living in the future and the guilt of living in the past to just the peace of being in the moment that I'm in right now, from moment to moment to moment. And I mean it when I say peace, because that's kind of how I feel. I don't feel a lot of the anxiety anymore that I used to feel, and the worries and the concerns. Because as Jesus said, sufficient is the evil in the day thereof. Why stick a stick in a hornet's nest? There's always going to be hornets. That's what he was said. That's probably what he said, but it didn't get recorded. So a lot of my life has been revolved around observing how this cruel formula of the state trying to get me to be the person they want me to be, and how they implement this force, this direction, this momentum into mainstream media and the scientific press, so that I've gotten to a point where I find myself much more equipped to discern what's true and what's false. And when you look at what's coming down the pike, and I see the trends, I don't worry about it anymore, because what's going to happen tomorrow is going to happen tomorrow. Now, because so many of our social institutions conspire together to reinforce the narratives that are at odds with reality, I think the word is gaslighting, which abusively alters your environment so that you start questioning what you see with your own eyes. It's getting to be more and more commonplace all the time. The minute you feel doubt about the way you're thinking, whether it's healthcare issues, vaccine issues, antibiotics, surgery that you're told you better get or you're going to lose control of your bowels or whatever else, listen to that little voice in the back of your head because you might be gaslighted. And since the scientific literature effectively gaslights us by refusing to publish validated data which challenges pharmaceutical interests while simultaneously allowing misinformation that promotes industry's interest to proliferate the critical data like information on COVID vaccine injuries. Largely absent from any credible academic source, and even to this day. And this is, in essence, is how they are able to convince people that vaccine injuries are very rare and greatly outweighed by the wonderful healing benefits of the vaccine, despite injuries being frequent and sometimes quite severe. I'm thinking of a lady right now who has very severe side effects from that vaccine. And because of this, the vaccine safety advocates get extremely frustrated. And then eventually, Charlie Kirk figured out a way to bypass this blockade and show people they weren't crazy for thinking COVID vaccine injuries were real. And then a few other people out there like Steve Kirsch and the Vaccine Safety Foundation hired polling firms to directly survey the public on vaccine injuries to try to provide some quantitative data on what was happening. And interestingly enough, the numbers that I gave you at the beginning of this program is what came out of that polling data. So in 2023, Professor Mark Skidmore hired a reputable polling firm, Dynata, D-Y-N-A-T-A, which surveyed 2,840 respondents and found that 15% of those vaccinated had a vaccine injury, 13% of whom categorized it as severe, along with 22% who said they knew someone with a severe vaccine injury. And since you can't just say that, because of the overwhelming opposition against the truth, the paper was retracted. And he was immediately subjected to an ethics investigation that, thank goodness, eventually cleared it. In 2024, a 1,000-person poll that Kirsch commissioned found that 12.5% to 20% of vaccinated respondents were injured from the shots. And roughly 2/3 of those who said they were injured categorized their injury as serious or very serious. So in the polls that I'm aware of, that I've seen, interestingly enough, the Democrats, and they asked their political affiliation, reported a somewhat higher rate of injury than the Republicans did, probably due to taking more vaccines. I don't know that's the case, but it seems like it. But simultaneously, they were less likely to think the vaccine was unsafe or ineffective. And likewise, numerous polls consistently found that those vaccinated were more likely to believe that the vaccine was safe and effective. And as no one wanted to touch this issue, only one polling organization independently investigated Rasmussen reports. And for American adults, they found, as of July of 2021, 32% believed that public health officials were lying about the safety of COVID-19 vaccines. In December of 2022, 56% of 1,000 respondents believed the vaccines were effective. 57 were concerned the vaccines had major side effects, but most importantly, 34% of those vaccinated reported minor side effects. Only 7% reported major side effects. And by major, it falls into the category of seriously impairing their quality of life. January 2023, just a month later, 49% believe that it was likely that the side effects of COVID-19 vaccines have caused a significant number of unexplained deaths. And 28% knew someone whose death may have been caused by the side effects. Same month, January 2023, 57% wanted Congress to investigate how the CDC handled assessing vaccine safety. Presumably, since many suspected the CDC had covered up the dangers. Well, I can go through here month by month by month as all the polls continue to unfold and reveal their information. But I just want to summarize this because I want to get into this CIA cover-up of a cancer cure. COVID-19 vaccine damage project, estimating the human cost. U.S. civilian labor force, 148 million, age 16 to 64, 148 million. Approximately 82% experience no effect. They're asymptomatic and are unvaccinated for COVID-19. The lost work time, 28.6% increase in absent rates, 50% increase in lost work time. 26.6 million had increased missed work time out of the 148 million. Disabilities, 1.36 million. 24.6% increase in disability rates of those who were vaccinated. And of those who were vaccinated, the extreme side effects, they figure in America alone, 300,000 deaths from the COVID vaccine. Excuse me. I am desperately fighting a cold. Now, one of the interesting discoveries in these polls is that the rate of respondents who reported being vaccinated is much lower than the official figures suggested. I suspect a key motivation for this was that each increasingly authoritarian COVID vaccine mandate could only be enacted if a sufficient number of people were vaccinated. So in addition to pushing as many people as possible to vaccinate, with the increasingly aggressive enticements we saw, scarcity sales, small payments, larger payments, prohibiting people from business, travel bans, social distancing, masking, businesses shutting down, mandates at school or work. These are likely also directly inflated their figures. In other words, it may not be completely truthful because some people may be using the poll to get back. Well, what's important today, March of 2026? Americans are less likely to say it's important for parents to have their children vaccinated. Wow. How important is it that parents get their children vaccinated? Extremely important, very important, somewhat important, or not very important, or not at all important. 2002, that's what, 24 years ago. The polling indicated above 95% felt that childhood vaccination by the parents that were polled, 95% said it's extremely important. By 2014, that number had dropped to barely over 80%. But in 2000, and this is a Gallup poll in 2024, 2 years ago, that 95% in 2002 had dropped to 69% as recently as 2 years ago. What happened between 2002 and 2024? It would have that big an effect on parents not thinking that vaccines were critically important for the health of their children. Can you come up with something more powerful than the COVID vaccine response? The poll also included the MMR shot, often associated with autism. Correctly or incorrectly, doesn't matter. It's how people perceive it. And in the poll, when these, at the very beginning, 2002, do benefits outweigh the risk? Was the question. 91% said yes, the benefits of the MMR shot outweigh the risk. In 2024, that 91 had dropped to 78%. So people are becoming more and more aware of this, but it's still an extremely hot, toxic issue. And as such, I think the Republicans, trying to not lose too many seats in the midterms, will probably leave this subject alone. Even though there's more and more people, and there are more, interestingly enough, it's the greater number of those who question the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. There's almost 20% more among Republicans than Democrats. All right, I think that'll do that. I carried that on a little bit long, but I wanted to make a point that I think people are starting to wake up. And I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm just telling you to research it. Now, a reasonable person would say, Jack, you sound sick. For a number of reasons. You sound sick. You should probably not finish the show and you should get some rest. No, I feel much better than I sound. And the warfare that I have mounted in my life against this cold onset actually is gaining ground. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about the CIA. No commercials played during the hour. I didn't see any commercials come across the screen. So I don't know what's going to happen at the top of the hour. But I'm going to go on with this hidden document that indicated a potential for cure for cancer has been declassified after 60 years. And you thought the CIA was just trying to make the world safe for American business. So this newly surfaced CIA document suggests that U.S. intelligence once reviewed research that hinted at a possible cancer treatment more than 60 years ago. And the document produced in February of 1951, declassified in 2014, summarizes a Soviet scientific paper that examined striking similarities between parasitic worms and cancerous tumors. Now, I still, as recently as last week, had patients asking me, do you think parasites cause cancer? Well, I think you're going to find parasites in cancerous tumors, just like you're going to find rats in the garbage. And it's nature's way of cleaning things up. But did the rat cause the garbage? Did the parasite cause the tumor? Well, that still has to be investigated. Because we have parasites throughout our entire body. Now, the report describes, and if you have pets, you've got more parasites in you than the person who doesn't have pets. If you've got cats that sleep in your bed with you, near your head, you're loaded with parasites. But you may not have any cancer at all. All right, the report describes how researchers believed that both organisms, the cancerous tumor and the parasites, thrived under nearly identical metabolic conditions, and they accumulated large reserves of glycogen, which is stored energy. The reason that you can fast for 3 days and not starve to death is because of all the glycogen that's stored in your liver and in your muscles. And it's just glucose, blood sugar, that's in a form that is stored in the liver and in the kidney or the muscles of the body, the strong muscles. And they found out that these tumors store glycogen. Now, the research also highlighted experiments showing that certain chemical compounds were capable of targeting both the parasitic infection and the tumor. So one drug that was called Myracil D, you can research this, Myracyl, Myracil D, was reportedly effective against Bilharzia parasites, as well as cancerous growths, hinting that treatments developed for parasites might also attack tumors. So other compounds were found to interfere with nucleic acid production, that's your DNA, and a process essential for the uncontrolled growth of cancer cells. Cancer cells cannot grow at the unprecedented rate that they do unless the DNA is directing it. And so a lot of cancer research has been aimed at slowing that DNA stimulus down. But in this document of Soviet research that the CIA had and covered up, indicated that they had compounds that would stop that DNA signaling of explosive cancer tumor growth. Now, experiments on mice showed that tumor tissues reacted differently to certain chemicals than normal tissues, further reinforcing the biochemical overlap between parasites and cancers. So another document that was declassified more than a decade ago recently subsurfaced online, fueling outrage among a bunch of Americans who say it raises troubling questions about why Cold War research hinting at possible cancer treatments sat in these intelligence archives for decades. Yeah, why? I've got these documents here in front of me. I'm not going to take the time to read them. But one of the documents say the Americans knew. They read it. They classified it as confidential, locked it up in a vault for 60 years. One person shared it on X. And another X user said the CIA knew from 1951 that cancer was parasites. And so that's where a lot of the promotion that exists in the alternative world out there right now is that cancer comes from parasites. I don't know that that's necessarily true, because parasites are a cleanup crew just like rats and flies. However, the document itself does not say that cancer was caused by the parasites, only that a Soviet study noted biochemical similarities between tumors and parasitic worms and observed that some compounds affected both in the experiments. Now, where would a parasite hang out inside your body? I want you to understand this one concept about cancer. Cancer doesn't know that you're there. And your body doesn't know that cancer is there. Or your immune system would destroy it. And the cancer tumor wants to survive. Does it have a consciousness? I don't know. But it takes steps to protect itself. Like they will store inside themselves ascorbic acid. Vitamin C, synthetic vitamin C. Cancer tumors store synthetic vitamin C, ascorbic acid. Whatever for? Because according to Linus Pauling, ascorbic acid will kill cancer tumors. Some. But some interesting research has come out that cancer tumors store the ascorbic acid. Why? because ascorbic acid is antioxidative. In other words, your natural killer cells that go after cancer cells inject cancer cells with an oxidative formula, causing oxidation inside the cancer cell to kill the cancer cell. So the cancer cell stores up the very thing that stops oxidation, ascorbic acid. Wow. Does the cancer cell have a brain? Where in the world is that coming from? Now back to my question. Where do parasites want to hang out in the body? Where they're marching through the forest dressed in British red like the British Army in 1774, with big red circles on their chest? Or do they do like the American Revolutionary guerrilla fighters who hid behind the trees and the bushes until the marching redcoats were within shooting distance? Same kind of concept. The parasites are going to hang out where they're safe. They're safe in the gut, but because they have the same metabolic process as cancer tumors, they hang out in the cancer tumors. And when the Soviets were experimenting with drugs, they found out that what stopped the oxidative processes in a cancer cell stopped the oxidative processes inside the parasites. Wow! What a discovery! Should have been on the front page of every newspaper in 1951. But it got covered up. The CIA buried that information. Now, parasitic worms, and you have them throughout your body, even if you don't have pets. Some parasites are good. Some parasites aren't so good. I've told this before. You have parasites that live up underneath your eyelids. Those are the good parasites. They're not eating your eyeballs. They're eating the bacteria that lands on your eyeballs. So at night, when your eyelids are shut, the cleaning crew, just like a nighttime custodial crew in an office building, comes in after the workday is over, empties the trash, sweeps the carpets, mops the floors, and gets things ready for the next day's business. You have parasites underneath your eyelids that clean off your eyeball during the night when you're sleeping. You have parasites in your brain that clean up protein metabolites. You have proteins in your heart that do the same thing. You have proteins in your liver. You have parasites in your liver, in your kidneys, in your ovaries, in your testicles, doing the same thing. Cleanup crew, just like flies and rats are a cleanup crew in the alleyway behind your houses. You clean up the garbage, the flies and the rats go away. Now, parasitic worms that inhabit our intestines rely heavily on something called anaerobic metabolism. Well, we're into the next hour. Meaning they generate energy without requiring a whole lot of oxygen. And tumor cells seem to operate in much the same way. They have altered metabolic pathways that allow them to survive in oxygen-poor environments inside the body, which is one reason I believe that hyperbaric chambers have been effective for cancer treatment, because it forces oxygen into the deepest confines of your anatomy and physiology. Because cancer cells don't do well in the presence of oxygen. You ever wonder why you don't have big old cancerous tumors growing outside your body like you do inside? Some people do, but most cancer cells are isolated to areas of low oxygen inside the body. Even deep breathing has been shown to be effective with some cancers. Now, my whole point of that is that the parasites in the tumors were observed to accumulate large stores of glycogen. As I said, it's stored sugar. stored blood sugar in a different in a different form that is storable, and it turns out that these parasites and these cancer tumors use that same molecule as an energy reserve. Now, researchers classified these tumors or these tissues, and a German scientist was able to distinguish which ones of these can produce oxygen, which one of these survive in a low oxygen environment. Imagine just studying that in a laboratory, studying bacteria, studying parasites as the different physiological world that it is. Now, I find that fascinating. Every now and then I run across a report that talks about that stuff. And I just eat that thing up. Now, they came out with this drug in 1951, Myricil D. And actually, it was synthesized in 1938 by a German scientist, but they started using it in 1951 on cancer tumors. And it had some promising success. Now, the research also examined how tumors and parasites reacted to a chemical known as atebrin, Atebrin. And in most animal studies, certain forms of this compound proved more toxic than the tumor. But in the proper forms, it was getting rid of tumors. And based upon these findings, the Soviet researchers proposed several biological features that tumors and parasites might share. And as such, they went after it with the idea that here we have a new effective therapy, Myricil D, and atebrin, that not only kills the tumors the parasites in the tumor, but the tumor itself. And how does it do it? It interrupts with the DNA signaling of cell replication. Amazing, just amazing. And there were people who, when they saw this document in 1951, understood what it meant for the cancer business. And so it was covered up. Now, this declassified report offers a rather rare glimpse into the scientific ideas that were being explored behind the Iron Curtain during the mid-20th century, when researchers were still grappling with the fundamental nature of cancer and searching for clues that might lead to effective treatments. But what we knew about cancer in 1951 was a lot. What we knew about cancer in 1901 was a lot. We had it pretty well figured out over 100 years ago. What's happened since then? Well, they've gone down the wrong road. And why? Because that's where all the funding is going. Because cancer is a huge business. The only health-oriented business that's more lucrative than cancer is heart disease. And heart disease is primarily the end result of malnutrition. We've been able to prove that over and over again. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pause the stream. I can mute the radio. I don't know how to pause the stream if I have to blow my nose. But I wanted to share this with you because this is just absolutely dramatic stuff. Now, I want to get in somewhat to children and their guts. Because there's a lot of children that and there are a lot of parents who are questioning the thinking behind that. But there's still too many children being put on antibiotics. And antibiotics is huge business, just as is uh, chemotherapy. So, with serious disease, whether it's physical, immune, emotional, what you have to do first is you have to fix the gut first. And we all have this thick layer of bacteria that lines our gut. It's called our flora, the plants. And these bacteria are essential to good health, and under the influence of drugs and other factors I'm going to discuss, gut flora can change in a way that can predispose people to various health problems. Just what will happen in your case is unpredictable and it's individual to you. One person can develop arthritis, another one schizophrenia. And rarely some people seem unaffected and recover completely, just rebuilding the damaged flora in the gut. This is what GAPS is about. The GAPS diet is designed to rebuild that flora in the gut. GAPS therapy has been used on children diagnosed somewhere in the autism spectrum with tremendously successful results. 85 to 86% of your immune system is in the gut. I've talked about this many times on this health show. Why? You know where the rest of it is? It's in your sinuses. It's in your throat. It's in your esophagus. Because this is where you are exposed to outer world influences. Influences that exist outside of you. The bacteria, the viral elements, the molds, the parasites that just completely cover everything. Most parasites aren't long tapeworm type structures that live in the gut. Most parasites, you need a microscope to see them. Bacteria, you need a microscope to see it. Viruses, you need an electron microscope to see it. Fungi, in many cases, when it's in the body, you need a microscope to see it. It's not just mushrooms and, black mold that you can see. But when you see black mold, you're seeing gigantic populations of fungus. Billions upon billions upon billions of fungi cells in order for you to see it. When you do bacterial studies and you take a sample of something and you stick it in a petri dish, and then you stick it in the little warmer, the oven, after a few hours to a few days, you have this bacteria growing there in these petri dishes. Those are billions of cells, not just one big, long, streptococcus bacteria. It's billions of them. And for the most part, these things live separate and apart inside of our bodies. And our gut is full of them. Now, it was believed for a long time that when babies were born, their gut was sterile. There was no bacteria in there yet. We're beginning to find out that might not be completely true. But the idea of colostrum from mama's breast in the first few hours of feeding the newborn infant wasn't just to give the baby colostrum, but to give mama's good bacteria that her breast milk is full of to get into the baby's gut and seed the baby's gut so that the wall of the gut was completely lined with this growing population of bacteria, because that bacteria sustains our life. That bacteria gives us enzymes. It gives us vitamins. It gives us chemical compounds. It gives us peptides that are just messaging signals inside the system to get that baby's body ready to live on its own. And just as it was separated from mom with the umbilical cord, eventually it has to be separated from the breast. And the breast takes the place of the umbilical cord in supplying nutrition to the baby. Now, one thing that's very important is your gut flora is the right arm of your immune system. And once damaged or altered, the resultant weakness in your immune system is going to leave you compromised and susceptible to all types of health problems and diseases, and from which a strong immune system normally protects you. But unfortunately, this condition known as dysbiosis, or a damaged and altered gut flora, is actually handed down from one generation to the next. And all too often, the saying is, well, it's all in your genes. I hear that all the time. Well, my grandfather had it, and my grandmother had it, and my mother had it, and now I have it, and so we know it's genetic. No. It's not in your genes. It's in your gut. There's reliable research out there that shows us that genetic problems that produce disease symptoms may be as little as 1 to 1.5% of the entire symptomatic picture. The rest of it comes from something else. And that something else is the gut. Now, a grandmother, it works like this. A grandmother who has mild digestive problems and dysbiosis, she will pass her mildly abnormal gut flora to her daughter at birth. And grandma does not breastfeed, which might have helped the problem, because during her gestation that was simply not the thing to do, because there was a period of time in the last century where breastfeeding was kind of blasé, that there were better things to do, like artificial manufactured breast milk. And so grandma can't or doesn't breastfeed, which makes the situation worse. So this daughter grows up suffering from indigestion, maybe allergies, maybe headaches, maybe menstrual problems, all related to this gut dysbiosis that she got from grandma. Then this daughter takes birth control pills to take care of the menstrual difficulties she's inherited. And that's not contradictory to what I was saying about inheritance before. It's just because she's got grandma's altered bacteria in her. And so she takes birth control pills, and her doctors treat her problem caused by dysbiosis with just more prescription drugs. And then she goes through many courses of antibiotics, all of which ignore the underlying cause of her suffering, her gut, and makes the gut problem worse. Then the daughter now has serious gut problems, resulting in more digestive problems, resulting in more immune system weakness. And these are causing her allergies, asthma, eczema, multiple infections, emotional problems, and at some point, she stops the birth control pills, she gets pregnant, has her own daughter to whom she passes down more serious gut dysbiosis. And as a result, the granddaughter may suffer from serious digestive problems, learning problems, menstrual problems, allergies, and everything kind of problems, including emotional and maybe even autism. And at this stage, the beneficial bacteria can no longer protect the gut from the ravages of opportunistic invaders, stealth microbes like viruses and fungi, and altered strains of bacteria. And thanks to our modern system, prescription drugs, poor diet, nutritional deficiencies, This is the normal gut for many millions of Americans. And all these people seek medical help for every one of their problems and diseases caused by dysbiosis. And this chronic doctoring always results in more prescriptions that are more damaging to the gut, making the whole thing worse. So, what are you going to do about it? Well, anytime somebody wants our serious consultation in these matters, and we've seen about everything in that clinic, we have to fix the gut first, because that's where the majority of your immune system is. People who have more than one autoimmune disease, people with lupus, have some of the worst guts imaginable. So severe dysbiosis is not a simple problem to cure. And it requires a major change in thinking and a major change in behavior. And you're going to need to give up your old diet and switch to a gut-friendly diet of whole foods. Processed and ultra-processed foods have got to go out the window. For at least 6 months without gluten or anything made from wheat, rye, barley, or oats. And if your gut problem is severe, there's a good book out there by Elaine Gottschall, Breaking the Vicious Cycle, Intestinal Health Through Diet. And then digestive enzymes. You're going to need to make sure that your digestive system is creating enough acids and enzymes to properly digest your food. Undigested food in the intestines caused primarily from too little stomach acid. And this is going to be definitely true for the omeprazole users. Is a major cause of dysbiosis. So you have to start at the mouth, making sure you eat real food versus the fake foods. And that you eat the foods your body can digest and chew your food really, really well. As I've often said to many people, you need to turn that roast beef into soup before you swallow it. There's various little points of interest out there on the internet about how many times you should chew your food before you swallow it. I don't know how many times. I just know that the food needs to be as close to soup as possible when you swallow it. Then you have to determine if you need additional stomach acid. And a huge percentage of the general population over age 50 suffers from low stomach acid. I use Zypan. I take Zypan with everything except fruit. If I'm having some cantaloupe, if I'm having watermelon, if I'm having an apple, a peach, a pear, and nothing else, I don't need enzymes. I don't need Zypan. Because fruit, for the most part, does not need to be digested. It just needs to be chewed up and swallowed, goes right through the stomach, right into the intestine. Other more complex carbohydrate, protein, fat structures have to be digested. And that's where I will use Zypan. Now, what are we going to do for these children? I keep getting threatened here with a sneeze. What are we going to do with these children who are the children of several generations of gut dysbiosis progenitors? Oh, there was a doubler. I haven't had a doubler in a long time. You ever have two sneezes at once? There is this new product that I like. Children's SP Children's Pro Symbiotic. It's a children's, excuse me, I was hoping I could get through the show before the sneezes started. But sneezing's good. And you hear my voice. My voice is fine because this thing I have been able to keep isolated to my sinuses. And I don't think I'm sick. I think I'm just detoxing. My sinuses are detoxing, as I said at the beginning of the show, from all the accumulated muck that I've been breathing all winter long. And even though we haven't had the tremendous snow and the air cleaning storms that come with it, we've had an awful lot of toxic material build up in the atmosphere here in the valley. Remember, we're at the bottom of the bathtub in the Intermountain West area. This is the lowest elevation for the most part. And so if you were really dirty and you had a bath and then you drain the bath water and you see all that stuff that you got to rinse out to the bottom of the tub after the water's gone, or the stuff that sticks along the sides of the tub, that's where we are. We're at the bottom of the tub in the Intermountain West. And that's why the Great Salt Lake is so salty, because of all the minerals that ended up here. Well, the atmosphere is the same way. We end up with an awful lot of material in the atmosphere because this is the bottom of the bathtub. And during normal winter storms, when the winds blow in and you got all that snow and everything else, it cleans the atmosphere. And then it rebuilds up again. You start getting the inversion and it builds up again. But for the most part, winters like we've had now, an awful lot more gook has been in the air, and I've been breathing it like everybody else, and I think my body is just trying to clean it out. It chose Wednesday, March 11th, to do it. Not this weekend. Would have been more convenient. So the SP Children's Pro-Synbiotic, it's a children's probiotic supplement which provides support for their flora in their gut. And it's a good source of fiber, and it promotes healthy bowel movements. And a lot of times, children who get sick a lot, or suddenly come down with something that they don't have a history of coming down with, on the opposite end of the spectrum, like a severe flu or something like that. It usually is preceded by some constipation, and the child doesn't always tell the parent that they can't poop. A wise, investigative mother will usually check into those kinds of things. And so anytime a child begins to demonstrate a certain degree of constipation, that child's on its way to getting sick. Just like a garbage strike in your neighborhood, and the garbage truck does not come by to pick up the stuff that's piling up out there on the street. Then the rats and the flies show up. Same thing in the gut. This product provides microbiome support. It feeds the good bacteria. It supports skin health because of the axis that exists between the gut and the skin. Your skin is another source of detoxification, and you know that. You've heard me talk about it, you've heard many other people talk about it. And usually when you get a skin condition, like eczema or psoriasis, it almost always happens with people who are constipated. The colon isn't detoxifying the body as well as it should, and so the body will use the skin for detoxification. And then you start getting aberrations in the surface of the skin and discoloring, and then you start getting the itching and all the stuff involved with psoriasis or eczema. And usually when we can get that gut healthy and start stimulating good regular bowel movements, the skin condition clears up all by itself. I mean, Sky Rizzi has built a huge business on people who are not having regular bowel movements. But they don't talk about that. They just talk about this uh, injection you get every now and then. And within 4 to 5 months, research has shown certain percentage of clearing, and in some cases, complete clearing of the itching on the skin. So, what makes this a synbiotic? It's a prosynbiotic. A synbiotic is a combination of probiotics and beneficial microorganisms that support good health and prebiotic fibers that feed the probiotic. And the probiotic is bacteria, bacteria that's good for you. There's good bacteria, there's bad bacteria, like E. coli. There's good E. coli, and then there's bad E. coli. And in a balanced diet, whether a child or an adult, the good E. coli keeps the bad E. coli under wraps, under control. The good bacteria prevents bad bacteria from overgrowth in a healthy gut. When the bad bacteria takes over and it starts leaking through the gut wall into the bloodstream where the immune system is sitting there waiting for it, then you can have all kinds of sick problems throughout the entire body as these toxins leak into the bloodstream. That's why anytime somebody comes to me with some kind of a major condition, I always say we're going to start with the gut. We're going to start with your gut. You've got to change how you're eating and what you're eating. If you're not going to do that, I can't help you. So, how do you give this stuff to your children? Well, you pick a time of day to start this prosynbiotic, and you know their routine best. However, for optimal absorption, it's best to take it with meals. And you just take a stick from the container that it's a powder that's inside this little packet, and you take a stick and you pour it into cold water or lukewarm water, and you can put it in a smoothie, you can put it in yogurt, applesauce, oatmeal, even chocolate milk, whatever it takes to get it down the child's gut. And then you stir, or you can stir it into food, but it's fully mixed. Bacteria are fragile, and we want them to get through the stomach acid. We want to avoid heat, blenders, food processors that can actually tear little bacteria to pieces. And but it will rebalance the bacteria in that child's gut and promote the growth of good bacteria in that child's gut that may have been damaged, or if they've had antibiotics, it's definitely been damaged. So what probiotics are here? There's several, but it does have Lactobacillus acidophilus. It's got Bifidobacterium lactis and Saccharomyces boulardii. 3 very, very important bacteria strains for the child's gut. Forgive me, but I've got to attend to my nose here for a moment. Sorry to present myself in this way. I could have just played an old show, and I thought about doing that. But this children's prosynbiotic is now available. You can get it at forbiddendoctor.com. SP Children's Prosynbiotic. And if you have children that have any kind of an ongoing problem, repeated ear infections, repeated throat infections, all this stuff is connected to the gut because their immune system is so taxed by what they are eating and what is starting to slip through the gut wall that the immune system is weakened to the point where opportunistic infections can take place. We all have strep bacteria in our throats. You can't get away from it. But why don't you have strep throat? Well, because the strength of your immune system is keeping it at bay. But children who go from one antibiotic to the next, they're sick one day, they're on antibiotics for 6 to 8 weeks, they do better, and then all of a sudden they got strep throat again. And then you give them another antibiotic. This is wreaking havoc with the gut bacteria. And so most of us know, well, you need to take, some kind of a probiotic. That's true, but I'm telling you, one of the best I've run across. Most of the stuff that comes from Standard Process is so thoroughly examined and researched that when it shows up in the marketplace, it's a damn good product. Would I give this to my children? Of course I would, but they're adults now. Would I give this to my grandchildren? Definitely. I've already suggested it to my 2 great-grandchildren. But family. They don't always see you as the expert that some other people do. Not that I'm an expert, but I know how to take a child who's sick and get them feeling better. There is this young man from Utah Valley who had a pretty severe case of autism. And he's been a patient for probably close to 2 years now. And now, when we first started taking care of him, and it was a trick to get x-rays, but I needed x-rays to know how to take care of his spine, because that's intimately related to his behavior as well, especially up here at the level of the brainstem. But I got good films, and I was able to figure out what side to work on, because only one side will fix things. The other side just makes things worse. You need to know which side you're working on. And over the months that followed, his behavior calmed down. He can still get out of control, but not nearly as frequently as he used to. But I started talking to the mother about his diet, and she began to research it. And from what was a screaming, kicking, just almost pathetic little guy 2 years ago, was in the clinic this last Monday. Hi, Dr. Jack. Just incredible. Goodbye, Dr. Jack. Thank you, Dr. Jack. I feel like I've become a part of this little guy's life. And I take care of his parents now as well. But he's just a beautiful young man who is going to have a different life now than he otherwise would have without this care. But just as important as the correction to his spine was to reduce pressure on his brainstem, was the treating of his gut. And his mother researched it and researched it and researched it. And she knows exactly what he can eat that will promote stable emotional behavior and what will cause him to explode. Will he grow out of that? Yeah, he'll get to a point where that won't be as significant or as important as it is now. But in the meantime, the point of all this is the importance of that gut, as well as the spinal correction. And whenever I'm dealing with somebody with some serious disease problem, and I know I've already said this a couple of times in the program, I'm going to say it again, we start with the gut. As soon as I have that spine in balance that opens up your nervous system to deal with the problems that it was encumbered to be able to do before because of the spinal misalignment, is now free to regulate the body's processes better. The body has to be fed what it needs to rebuild itself. And so I recommend the Mediterranean diet. And there's a lot of good diets out there, and some of them are pretty, Spartan, and some of them are kind of crazy, and they pass through the population like one fad after another. Like one of the latest fads out there right now is peptides. Oh, I got to get the right kind of peptides. That'll blow over before long. Peptides are chemical messengers. They're made out of amino acids, but not to the point of becoming a protein. But some of them are proteins, but a lot of them aren't. If you were to eat a 4-ounce piece of steak and you had good gastric digestion, so that your stomach acid was strong enough to break that meat down into soup, which is what it's supposed to do. When it leaves the stomach and goes into the small intestine, it's very liquidy. And it's made up of amino acids, partially digested proteins that have produced peptides. These peptides are signaling messages once they get out of the gut into the small intestine to signal what needs to be done to further that digestion. So there's so-called research out there floating around now, this peptide for muscle development, this peptide for preventing Alzheimer's, this peptide, and it goes on and on. Your body produces these peptides on its own. I don't know that you need to go to tremendous expenditures to follow this peptide market that's going on. You just need to eat meat. That's where the peptides come from. Now, we usually overdo meat. We probably eat way too much. I've been cutting back on that quite a bit. I've been cutting back on my diet, period. And as of this morning, I have lost 23 pounds since December, just by cutting back on what I eat and trying to make sure that what I eat is something that Mother Nature made. Now, the Thai, Vietnamese Thai soup pho, PHO. I went to a new restaurant last Wednesday night or Friday night, and some of the most delicious pho I've ever had. It's over there, up behind the Porcupine, on East 72nd South, just before you go up into the canyon. Saola, Saola, something like that. And checked it out on the internet, had good reviews. We went there. I had some of the most delicious soup I have ever had. And it is a 24-hour boil of bones with the marrow and the bones. 24 hours it was in a low rolling boil to cook all that nutrition out of those bones. And then it has the Thai spices, of course, and sliced jalapenos. And I get my pho with shrimp. And I'm telling you, it was the way I felt afterwards, getting that nutrition into my body. Now, I tried very sparingly to hold back on those rice noodles. But there's no gluten in rice. So I'm a little more partial to eating rice noodles than I am semolina. But it was just delicious, and it was how I felt afterwards. I felt energetic because I was eating something from Mother Nature. And interestingly enough, it took away my hunger. I took half of it home. And I find the more I'm cutting back, the Japanese say to not eat more than 75% of your stomach's capabilities if you're going to eat a big meal. Because the stomach, you can't feel it, but the stomach is going to go through these churning waves with the food that you eat to mix it thoroughly with the acids and the enzymes that are present in that solution, and the pepsin that will be released from the stomach wall to break down collagen. And so it's sitting there with this waving movement. And if you stuff yourself to the point where you feel stuffed, there's no room left in the stomach for that churning to take place. Oh, it'll try to churn, but you're not going to get anything mixed. Anything more than if you just seriously overload a washing machine to where what you're washing is coming out of the top of the washing machine. You can't expect that soap and water to get everything in there and get the job done. Well, it's the same thing with the churning in your stomach. So I have been cutting way back on what I eat, way back, trying to limit it to what Mother Nature produces. So I don't know how I got off on this topic, except I don't feel that I have any gut problems. The more I eat food from Mother Nature, the less indigestion, the less constipation, less diarrhea, or the other kinds of things that affect the gut. When these things are present, that's called gut dysbiosis. And in children, it's even more important because we want to build healthy bacteria in the gut of that child as it matures, so that the good bacteria rules in the life of that child through adulthood. If they get loaded with bad bacteria, it's going to be a very difficult problem down the road, taking care of the kinds of problems that are associated with gut dysbiosis, not the least of which is consciousness problems, headache, migraine problems, menstrual problems, reproductive problems in the sense of fertility, nervous system problems, skin problems, that all come back to a sick gut. That's why I'm talking here about SP Children's Prosymbiotic. Little packets. You snip it open with scissors, or you could tear it open if your fingers are strong enough. And you just pour it into some lukewarm water, or you can put it into whatever they're drinking. You can mix it in their food. You can put it in a yogurt smoothie or something like that. You don't want to whip it up too hard, because that tearing of the blades can tear up the bacterial structures, even though they're so small you can't see them. It is just an excellent source of fiber for these kids. What age can you start it at? 1 year old. And especially children who have had repeated antibiotics is the prime case for these kids. So gut dysbiosis is hardly ever talked about anymore. It was a big fad 10, 15 years ago. The work of Dr. McBride has opened the eyes of millions around the world that all the things that they have tried to overcome their illnesses, sicknesses, whatever kind of opposition to the expression of full health that they wanted, usually is taken care of by going for the gut first and rebuilding the good bacteria. That's what GAPS is all about. GAPS. At forbiddendoctor.com under education. There's got to be anywhere from 8 to 10 podcasts on the subject of GAPS. If you've ever felt stuck, you don't know what to do next, you know that one round of antibiotics after another is not the answer, go listen to GAPS, the GAPS podcasts at forbiddendoctor.com under education. A lot of work was put into those things to give you the best information that we could, and especially with children, because just as a child's psychology, and by that I mean how they see themselves in the world around them, is pretty well set by the time they're 6 years old, according to child psychologists. The gut of these children is pretty well set by the time they're 6 years old. And children who are constantly fed breakfast cereals, fast foods, pizzas, not that occasional pizza is harmful, just all the time. All these bad seed oil fried foods, chicken nuggets, and all this kind of stuff that we feed them from fast foods will tear up the gut and really promote the overgrowth of bad bacteria. But it's not a terminal sentence. It can be reversed and turned around. And that's part of the job, part of the responsibility I see myself doing when it comes to taking care of the families that we take care of. Now we're in the process of setting up labs because more and more people are coming in that I know probably have bad labs. And so I ask them, when's the last time, you did a good blood draw, and do you have copies of the lab reports? Let me see what's going on inside of you chemically, biochemically. And all too often, they haven't had good labs done in years, or they don't have access to the lab report, and I tell them how to get it, but often they don't. So we're setting up a system where I can order labs for my patients. So I want to be more comprehensive with the patients that we take care of. Because more and more of them are realizing that drugs may not necessarily be their best alternative, especially when it comes to children. So I want to tell you what's in this children's probiotic. Inulin from chicory root, organic oat fiber, green banana flour, royal ancient oats, flour, apple pectin, yeast, and organic beetroot. Those are the things that are in there. And everybody's body is unique. Every child's body is unique. Every child's gut is unique. And so the benefits one may experience typically depend on a lot of different factors, including lifestyle and environment and underlying health conditions. Some have seen results in as little as 24 to 48 hours. Others, it takes a week or so. But with daily use, you are rebuilding the gut of your children's immune system, the front line of their immune system. It's often been referred to as your immune system's right arm. Now you got all these police stations, all your lymph nodes are immune police stations where you have concentrations of the white blood cells and the other factors, so many other factors besides white blood cells. They're your first line of defense. But they're strong when the gut is strong. When the gut is sick and weak, it's like you're drawing policemen from the police station to go downtown to take care of some problems, and the surrounding communities have a tremendous decrease in the population of the police. And that leaves them open to crime. Or in the sense of the body's physiology, open to opportunistic diseases that bring them constant earaches, constant sore throats, constant stomach aches, constant flopping back and forth between diarrhea and constipation, and skin problems, or even psychological problems, especially in the sense of anxiety and manic behavior. We've been able to calm those things down quite a bit just with lifestyle changes. All right, we're coming up here towards the end of the program. I haven't been as energetic as I often am because I'm trying to conserve my energy. But once you've normalized your gut, once you've normalized your stomach, it's just amazing how fast health can return. Now, I want to mention the half off special for what I do structurally to the spine, to open up the immune system, to open up the emotional expression of life. It's still half off. This was just supposed to be a December special. But I'm telling you, every time I turn around, I can hear Trudy on the phone talking to a new patient. And we're scheduled out a little bit, but if there's somebody who's in severe pain, I've told Trudy and I've told Hannah, get them in. Don't make them wait. If they're hurting that bad, find a spot. And I've even started seeing people during my lunch hour because of the demand for this. You would call 801-523-1890, 801-523-1890. And um, we'll consult for 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever, where I explain what it is I do. If it sounds like it's something you're looking for beyond what you've heard here on the radio, I'm scheduled to go ahead and take care of you, as I did two people yesterday. As I mentioned earlier, one was in their 70s, the other was in their 80s. And they're just people with constant, ongoing, unrelenting low back pain and sciatica and neck pain and headaches and mid back pain. And just with one correction to the spine, doesn't fix the whole thing, but it gives them immediate relief that they were looking for. And then there'll be a few follow-up visits to make sure we nail it down. Now, any minute, K-Talk is going to be going to the national news at the top of the hour. And then I will finish off with those of you who are hanging around on the stream. But I'm looking forward to getting back on the Monday show for a world update, because boy, what's going on out there is just incredible. And then I think I'm even seeing somebody this Saturday, a new patient this Saturday. And I like my Saturdays off because I like to rest like the rest of you, but I'll be seeing somebody Saturday that is only available at that time. And I get a kick out of this. I get a kick out of returning the expression of life back into my patients. And that's mainly what I'm after, is turning the life button back on again by stopping compression of the bottom end of the brainstem. All right, I am patiently waiting for the news to take over here at K-Talk, and I don't see anything popping up yet. So to those of you who are on the stream, I'm going to end that. Thank you for paying attention, liking and subscribing. Just a few more people, we will be over the 900 mark, and then on to 1,000. 1,000 is the big demarcation for YouTube presence. So to those on the stream, thank you for your attention. I'm going to end that broadcast.